The door lock clicked behind me like a gun being cocked. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe he just didn't want other customers walking in while he dealt with whatever weirdness was clearly sitting on his face. But when Raymond grabbed my arm and pulled me past the display cases and through the door that led to the back room, when he looked over his shoulder twice before he even spoke, something cold moved through my chest, something that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Sit down, Daniel," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "Raymond, what is—" "Sit down." I sat. He placed Gloria's glasses on the small workbench in front of him, her reading glasses, the ones with the thin rose gold frames she'd picked out herself 2 years ago because she said they made her look like a sophisticated professor and less like, in her own words, a tired woman who's been married to you for 22 years. I laughed at that. She had too. Those glasses had been sitting on her nightstand when she died. I'd knocked them off once, reaching for my phone in the dark, and one of the arms had cracked at the hinge. 5 months later, I finally brought myself to pick them up and bring them in. I don't even know why. It's not like she was going to wear them again. Maybe I just needed something to do with my hands, something that felt like taking care of her, even now. Raymond connected a thin cable from his computer to the frame. I watched him. He was pale. Raymond is never pale. This man has laughed at funerals. I've seen him eat a sandwich while giving someone a glaucoma test. Nothing rattles Raymond. He was rattled. The screen filled with a file directory, lines and lines of video files, audio files, timestamps going back almost 8 months. And then he turned to me with eyes that looked genuinely sorry for what he was about to say. "Check the will, Daniel. Check it right now, before you're next." My name is Daniel Cruz. I am 54 years old. I am a semi-retired electrician from Clarksville, Tennessee, and until about 18 months ago, I was a man who thought the most dramatic thing that would ever happen to him was the time I accidentally wired a client's bathroom fan directly to their doorbell. Every time someone rang the doorbell, the exhaust fan would run. I thought that was peak chaos. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. I've been described as steady, calm, the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice much and doesn't panic when things go sideways. My father used to say I had a slow fuse. Gloria used to say the same thing, though she usually followed it up with, "Which is great, except when I need you to be mad on my behalf and you just stand there looking thoughtful." She wasn't wrong about that either. Gloria was my wife for 22 years. We met at a hardware store. I know, very romantic, very cinematic, where she was trying to figure out which grade of sandpaper she needed for a DIY cabinet project, and I happened to work there part-time while I was building my business. I gave her the wrong grade on purpose. Don't judge me. I was 29 and she was beautiful, and I needed an excuse to see her again when she came back to exchange it. It worked. We were married 14 months later. She passed away 7 months ago. Congestive heart failure, the doctor said. She was 51, no prior heart conditions that anyone knew of. It was fast and it was brutal, and it left me standing at a graveside in October, wondering how a person is supposed to exist when the thing that gave their life its shape is suddenly just gone. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. Now, where were we? Right, the back room. Raymond, the glasses. Raymond O'Coffer has been my friend since we were both volunteering at a church fundraiser in 2003, and we got assigned to the same booth and spent 4 hours arguing about whether a hot dog is a sandwich. He became an optometrist. He opened his shop on Commerce Street 12 years ago. He was at my wedding. He was at Gloria's funeral. He is maybe 6 people on this earth I would trust with anything. So when Raymond tells me to check the will, I don't laugh it off. I don't say, "Okay, buddy, lay off the crime podcasts." I sit very still and I listen, because Raymond's hands are shaking, and Raymond's hands never shake. "These frames," he said, pointing at Gloria's glasses sitting on the bench,
have a micro camera built into them, right here. He pointed to a tiny, near-invisible lens embedded in the bridge of the frame, disguised as a decorative rivet, and a micro SD card in the left arm. I found it when I opened the hinge to fix it. Somebody put this in here. This wasn't factory. This was custom installed, and it was installed by someone who knew what they were doing. I stared at the glasses. Gloria's glasses, I said. Yes. Someone put a camera in my wife's glasses? Yes, Daniel. While she was alive?
The timestamps on these files go back 8 months. She died 7 months ago, so yes, while she was alive. I picked up the glasses carefully, like they were made of something fragile and sacred. Because they were. Because she had worn them. Because her fingerprints were probably still on them somewhere. And here, I was finding out they were also a surveillance device that someone had hidden on her face without her knowledge. Or, and this thought arrived quietly, but it hit hard, with her knowledge. "Have you watched any of the files?" I asked. Raymond nodded slowly. "A few, just enough to understand what I was looking at." He paused. "Daniel, I need you to prepare yourself." "I've been preparing myself for 7 months," I said. "I buried my wife. I can handle whatever's on there." He turned the monitor toward me and pressed play. The first video was from 8 months ago. The camera angle was low and slightly tilted. Of course it was. It was mounted in eyeglass frames. And it showed Gloria sitting at our kitchen table. Across from her was my brother-in-law, Thomas. Thomas Whitfield, Gloria's younger brother. 47 years old, financial advisor, man who gave the most polished eulogy I have ever heard at Gloria's funeral, complete with a printed copy that he clearly had someone proofread, which I thought was strange at the time, but chalked up to Thomas just being Thomas. He was always that guy, the one who made everything look managed and professional, the one who had a system for everything. The one who, apparently, was sitting across from my wife 8 months ago, telling her things that made her reach up and adjust her glasses in a very deliberate way right before the conversation started, almost like she was making sure the camera was pointed at him. The audio was quiet, but Raymond had a decent microphone set up, and the playback was clear enough. Thomas's voice. "Gloria, I need you to think about this carefully." Gloria's voice. And I want you to know that hearing her voice again after 7 months nearly took me completely apart. "I have thought about it carefully, Thomas. The answer is still no. You're being emotional. I'm being my husband's wife, which is actually my job. The policy is worth $400,000. Daniel doesn't need. Daniel is my husband, and that policy is for him. It has always been for him. We set it up 20 years ago, and I am not changing the beneficiary." Thomas leaned forward on the screen. "Gloria, the investment opportunity I told you about is real. The returns are guaranteed. If you just redirect, nothing is guaranteed, Thomas. You know that." Silence. Then Thomas, quieter. "I need this." And Gloria, even quieter. "I know you do. That's exactly why the answer is no." The video ended. I sat with that for a moment. Raymond didn't say anything. He let me sit with it. There was a life insurance policy, a $400,000 life insurance policy that I honestly almost forgotten about because I had not been thinking about money for the last 7 months. I had been thinking about how to get through each day without calling her phone just to hear her voicemail. I hadn't opened any financial documents. I hadn't touched anything. Our accountant had been handling the estate paperwork, and I had signed what I was told to sign without really reading any of it. "Raymond," I said, "how many files are on here?" 63 videos, 41 audio recordings. 63 videos, 41 audio recordings. My wife had been secretly documenting something for an entire month before she died. She had modified her own glasses, or had someone modify them, and she had been quietly collecting evidence. My wife, who I sometimes accused of being overly trusting and too kind for her own good.
My wife, who apparently knew something was wrong and had been building a case while she was dying. Before I go any further, and I mean this, if this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me every time I tell it, please subscribe. I know that sounds like a weird place to put that, but the truth is these stories keep going because people like you keep showing up for them, and right now I need you to show up. Hit that button. Gloria deserved to be heard. Let's make sure she is. The next video I watched was from 3 weeks before she died. Gloria was in the car, parked somewhere I didn't recognize. She reached up and adjusted the glasses again. I started to understand that move, that deliberate little adjustment was her way of making sure she was recording. And then she picked up her phone and made a call. The voice on the other end said, "Whitfield Financial." Gloria said, "I need to speak to Thomas Whitfield. Tell him it's her sister." A pause. Then Thomas, "Gloria. Gloria, you need to stop." Thomas, "I don't know what you're—" Gloria, "I have a cardiologist appointment next Thursday. Would you like to know what he told me last month?" Silence. "A cardiologist, Thomas." Thomas, "Gloria, you're being paranoid."
Am I? Because I've also been keeping a journal, and I've been recording things, and I've had a conversation with an attorney about what happens if I die unexpectedly in the next few months. So, if I were you, I would think very carefully about your next move. There was a long silence. Then Thomas, his voice doing something I can only describe as cracking at the edges. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I hope you're right," Gloria said. "I genuinely hope you are." She ended the call. Then she sat in the car for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, slow and controlled, the way she used to breathe when she was trying not to cry. "Okay," she said quietly. To no one, or maybe to me somehow. Maybe to whoever she imagined might watch this someday. "Okay, I documented it. It's on record." She never went to the toxicologist. She collapsed 4 days before that appointment. She died in the hospital 2 days after that. I had to step away from the computer. I walked to the corner of Raymond's back room and I stood there with my hands against the wall, and I did not cry because I was past crying. I was somewhere on the other side of crying, in a place that is very quiet and very cold and very focused. My wife had known. She had known something was wrong. She had been afraid, and she had been documenting it, and she had been trying to protect me, protect the life insurance policy, protect our money, protect the future she would no longer be part of, and she had died anyway. And somewhere across town, Thomas Whitfield was alive. He was wearing his nice suits and eating his nice lunches, and he had given a beautiful, polished eulogy at his sister's funeral, and he was probably very close to getting access to $400,000 that my wife had died protecting. "Raymond," I said, without turning around, "don't tell anyone about this." "Already forgot everything," he said. "But Daniel, I need a copy of everything on that card." "Already made 2. One for you, one in a safe place." I turned around. Raymond was looking at me with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression I probably had on my face, the calm before the kind of storm that rearranges landscapes. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to read the will," I said, "and then I'm going to make some calls." I want to pause here and tell you something about Thomas Whitfield, because you need to understand the full picture. Thomas was the charming one in the family, always had been. He could walk into any room and within 20 minutes everyone in it would think he was their best friend. He had this gift for making people feel seen and important, which is a beautiful gift when it's genuine and a devastating weapon when it isn't. He had built a successful financial advisory business partly on this talent, which, I will say this carefully, should have been a yellow flag in retrospect.
He had also, over the years, borrowed money from Gloria and me 3 separate times. $20,000 the first time to get his business started. He paid that back. $15,000 the second time because of a bad investment. He paid back 12 of it, and we let the other 3 go because family. The third time was $30,000, and that was 4 years ago, and we had never seen a dime of it. And every time I brought it up with Gloria, she would say, "He'll pay it when he can," in the tone of voice she used when she didn't want to fight about something. $68,000 total, just in loans, not counting the family dinners he never contributed to, the birthday gifts that always came late or not at all, the time he asked me to rewire his whole home office and then never mentioned compensation once. I am not a petty man. I am a patient man, but I have a memory like a steel trap, which Thomas had either forgotten or never understood. Now I was sitting in my car in Raymond's parking lot with a USB drive in my hand, and I was remembering all of it. I called our estate attorney, Linda Marsh. She had been handling Gloria's estate paperwork. She was sharp and efficient and slightly terrifying, which is exactly what you want in an attorney. "Daniel," she said, "what can I do for you?" "The life insurance policy, the $400,000 one. Has anything happened with it?" A pause. Too long of a pause. "Linda." "Daniel, I was actually going to call you this week. There's been a complication." "What kind of complication?" "A document was submitted to the insurance company 3 weeks ago, a beneficiary change form, dated from 8 months ago." There it was. There was the move Thomas had been making while I was busy grieving. "It's dated 8 months ago, but it was submitted 3 weeks ago." "Correct." "Is it in Gloria's handwriting?" "It appears to be." "But Daniel, I have to tell you, something about the document has been bothering me since I saw it. The notary stamp." "Daniel, I have 63 videos and 41 audio recordings made by my wife in the last month of her life. I have her on recording saying she never changed that beneficiary and she never intended to. I have her on recording confronting the person she believed was trying to steal her life insurance. And I have some questions for a toxicologist." Silence. "Daniel," said Linda slowly, "I need you to send me everything immediately. I also need the name of a good private investigator. I already have one on speed dial. I'll make the call."
I will tell you something about the next 6 weeks that I think is important. I am not a dramatic person. I do not enjoy conflict. I am the guy who will drive an extra 20 minutes to avoid a difficult conversation. But there is something that happens to a quiet, patient person when they are pushed far enough, when the thing they have been patient about turns out to be genuinely evil rather than just inconvenient. Something aligns. All that steadiness, all that calm, all that slow fuse that everyone has been describing for 54 years, it does not explode. It focuses like a laser, like a very, very precise electrical current running exactly where it needs to go and not 1 inch further. I became, for 6 weeks, the most organized person in Clarksville, Tennessee. Linda and I went through every document in Gloria's estate. Thomas had submitted the forged beneficiary change form through a notary who, it turned out, had a prior business relationship with Thomas's financial firm. The date on the form was fake. The signature was close. Thomas had clearly practiced, but it wasn't perfect, and a forensic document examiner found 3 inconsistencies within 48 hours. The private investigator, a woman named Doris Kendrick, who looked like somebody's retired librarian and moved like a shadow, spent 2 weeks looking into Thomas's finances. What she found was not surprising and also somehow still shocking. Thomas was in debt, seriously in debt, not had a rough year debt, 4 creditors and a tax lien debt. His financial advisory business was a beautiful storefront with a very empty warehouse behind it.
He had been running a soft investment fraud scheme for years, not dramatic enough to attract federal attention yet, but significant enough that several of his clients were quietly furious, and one had already been talking to a lawyer. He needed that $400,000 like a man needs oxygen. And here is the plot twist that I have been saving because you deserve it, and because it hit me like a 2x4 when I found out. The toxicology consultation that Gloria had scheduled before she died, the appointment she never made it to, I made it. I gathered everything I could find, her medical records, the blood work results from the months before she died, a list of every meal or drink she'd shared with Thomas in the 3 months before her death, which Gloria had carefully noted in a journal that I found in her nightstand under a copy of a novel, because of course my brilliant, meticulous wife had been keeping a written journal in addition to the video recordings because she wanted redundancy. The toxicologist's name was Dr. Arnav Patel. He spent 3 hours reviewing everything. Then he called me. "Mr. Cruz," he said, "I want to be careful about how I phrase this because I am not a law enforcement officer and I want you to take this information to the appropriate people immediately." "Understood," I said. The pattern of cardiac stress your wife exhibited in her final months, combined with several markers in her blood work that her cardiologist noted as unusual, is consistent with chronic low-level exposure to a specific class of compounds that can stress the cardiac muscle over time without being immediately obvious. These compounds are metabolized fairly quickly, without specifically testing for them during an acute episode or shortly after death. They may not show up on a standard toxicology screen. "Are you telling me," I said very carefully, "that it's possible my wife was poisoned?" "I am telling you that the clinical picture is consistent with that possibility and that this information needs to go to law enforcement immediately, along with a request for a further examination of the death records." I want to stop here and say something. This moment, this phone call, was the moment I understood what the last 7 months had actually been. I had been grieving a loss, a terrible, unfair, random loss, because the world is cruel, and sometimes people die too young without any reason at all. And that grief was real. But underneath it was something else, something I hadn't had the shape of until right now. My wife had not just died, my wife had been murdered. And while I had been standing in our kitchen, trying to figure out how to make dinner for one, the man who had done it had been wearing a nice suit and filing forged documents and waiting to collect. I sat with that for a long time. Then I got back to work. Because here's the thing about a slow fuse, Thomas. When it finally reaches the end, it is spectacular. One more CTA right here because I need you with me for what happens next. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. This is the part where everything Gloria worked so hard to document finally starts to matter. Don't miss it. Linda coordinated with a detective in the Clarksville Police Department named Sergeant Bill Hawkins, who, I will say, was initially skeptical in the way that law enforcement professionals are trained to be skeptical when a grieving widower comes in with a USB drive and a story. That skepticism lasted approximately 40 minutes, which was how long it took to watch 3 of the videos and read the toxicologist's report. Then Sergeant Hawkins made some calls.
Then, some people from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation made some more calls. Then the financial fraud angle got looped in, because when you're already investigating someone for potential poisoning, you might as well look at everything. And Doris Kendrick's report about Thomas's clients and the tax lien and the questionable investment practices gave the investigation a very full picture to work with. Here is what I want to tell you about what happened next, because this is the part that matters, and I want to describe it with the care it deserves. I did not tip Thomas off.
I did not confront him. I did not call him or text him or show up at his office or do any of the things that would have felt satisfying in the moment, but would have given him time to lawyer up or disappear or shred documents. I had learned patience from 54 years of living and from watching my wife in the last month of her life document everything slowly and carefully because she understood that the goal was not to feel better in the moment. The goal was to be effective. I did exactly one thing that was not strictly procedurally necessary. 3 days before Thomas was arrested, I invited him to lunch. He came. Of course he came, because in his mind I was Daniel, steady, oblivious, grieving Daniel, who hadn't looked at the will closely enough, who hadn't noticed the insurance paperwork, who had been too lost in his grief to pay attention to the financial details. In his mind, I was the mark. We sat at a restaurant downtown. He ordered a salad. I ordered the pulled pork plate because I was hungry and also because I deserved something good. We talked about nothing for a while. How I was doing, how work was. He mentioned Gloria in that careful, tender voice he'd practiced until it sounded real. And then I looked at him across the table and I said, very calmly, "Thomas, did Gloria ever tell you she loved you?" He blinked. "Of course, she was my sister." "She did," I said. "She told me once that even when she frustrated her, even when you borrowed money you didn't pay back, even when you were selfish in ways that were honestly impressive, she said she loved you anyway, because you were her brother and she was built that way." Thomas was quiet. Something moved across his face. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. I think about that sometimes, how she was built, how she loved people. I let that sit there between us. Then I paid the check, said it was good to see him, and left. That was all I wanted. I wanted him to have one meal where he almost felt something, one moment where the version of himself that might have been different looked him in the eye across a restaurant table, one afternoon where he sat with what he had done without knowing that I knew. Was it enough? No, absolutely not. But I'm 54, and I've learned that you can want justice and also want someone to feel the weight of what they did, and those are not the same thing, and you can have both. Thomas was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I know because Sergeant Hawkins called me before it happened as a courtesy. The charges were substantial. Fraud for the forged beneficiary documents, financial fraud for the scheme involving his clients, and, this is where the investigation had gone further than even I had expected, criminally negligent homicide, potentially escalating, pending the findings of a formal examination of Gloria's case. The toxicology was still being built. It is a slow and careful process, but the investigators believed they had enough to charge, and charge they did. When Thomas was walked out of his office building in front of 3 of his employees and one very surprised client, he was wearing the nicest suit he owned because he had a client meeting that morning. I heard this from Doris, who heard it from someone she knew in the building, because Doris knows everyone everywhere. His business was suspended pending investigation within the week. The forged beneficiary change was invalidated. The $400,000 life insurance policy paid out to me as the original and rightful beneficiary, which is what Gloria had always intended. And here is the part I want to linger on for a moment, because it is the part that I think about most. With a portion of that money, I set up a scholarship at Gloria's old high school. Gloria had been a first-generation college student. She had fought for every opportunity she got, and she had spent her adult life believing that other people deserved the same fight on their behalf. The scholarship is for first-generation college students from lower-income families in our county. It covers books and fees for the first year. It's not going to change the world by itself, but it has Gloria's name on it, and that feels exactly right. The rest I used the way any reasonable 54-year-old man should, carefully, thoughtfully, and occasionally on a very nice dinner when I need to remind myself that I am still here and still alive and still eating pulled pork while the people who underestimated me figure out what to do next. Thomas's trial is pending. I'll spare you the legal details because I am not an attorney, and also because watching legal processes unfold in real time is like watching paint dry, except the paint might go to prison. What I will tell you is that the case is solid. Linda is sharp. The evidence is thorough. My wife made sure of that from beyond the grave, because she was smarter than anyone in that courtroom ever gave her credit for, including me. And that is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I go back to Raymond's shop sometimes, not for glasses, my vision is fine, annoyingly, but just to visit. We drink the terrible instant coffee he makes in the back room, and we argue about things that don't matter. He told me recently that he thinks about the day I brought in those glasses, and he wonders sometimes what would have happened if he hadn't looked inside the hinge, if he had just glued it and handed them back. I told him I try not to think about that. He said, "She knew what she was doing, putting that camera there. She was giving you a way to find out." "I know," I said. "She trusted you to figure it out." "I know," I said again. We sat with that for a minute. Then he said, "You know what really bothers me about all of this?" "What?" "She wore those glasses every day for a month while she was collecting evidence against her own brother, and she never once said anything to you." "No," I said. "Weren't you even a little offended that she didn't loop you in?" I thought about that. I had thought about it a lot, actually. At first, yes, there was something in me that wanted to ask why she hadn't just told me, hadn't pulled me aside and said, "Daniel, I think Camus is trying to steal from us, and I think something is wrong with my health, and I need you to know this." Why she had done it alone and quietly and left me a trail of breadcrumbs to follow after she was gone. And then I thought about it more, and I understood. Because if she had told me, I would have confronted Thomas immediately. I would have walked up to him with my slow fuse fully lit, and I would have said things that would have given him time to cover his tracks and disappear. Because I loved her, and she was my wife, and someone was threatening her, and I would have been fire. She kept me out of it because she knew me. She protected the evidence by protecting me from my own reactions. She built the case in a way that would actually work, that would actually hold up, that would actually mean something. Because she understood that what she wanted wasn't just for Thomas to be stopped. She wanted him to be accountable, really accountable, the kind that requires patience and documentation and an ironclad record. She didn't shut me out because she didn't trust me. She shut me out because she did. I was a little offended, I told Raymond. He laughed. "Yeah, that tracks. But I'm not anymore." He nodded. "She was smarter than me," I said. "She always was. I knew that when I gave her the wrong sandpaper at the hardware store." Raymond looked at me. "Wait, you gave her the wrong sandpaper on purpose to see her again?" "Yes?" He shook his head slowly. "Daniel, that is both the most romantic and most pathetic thing I have ever heard in my life." "Thank you," I said. "I know." And we drank our terrible coffee, and we sat in the back room where this whole thing had started, and outside on Commerce Street, the world went on exactly as it always has, traffic and people and ordinary days stacking up on top of each other. And I sat there, 54 years old and a widower, and somehow, in spite of everything, still here. Gloria is still here too, in the scholarship with her name on it, in the recordings that documented her last month with a quiet, deliberate courage that still makes me catch my breath when I think about it, in the way I now check every document before I sign it and ask questions I used to be too trusting to ask and pay attention to the things I used to think were beneath my notice. She changed me. She kept changing me even after she was gone. I think that's what love does when it's real. It doesn't stop just because one of you isn't in the room anymore. Thomas Whitfield is awaiting trial. He lost his business. He lost his reputation.
He lost the $400,000 he had risked everything for. He lost his sister years before she died, I think, though neither of them fully admitted that. And sitting in whatever room he's sitting in right now, with whatever remains of everything he thought he was building, I hope he thinks about a lunch at a downtown restaurant and a question someone asked him about whether his sister loved him. I hope the answer is uncomfortable. I hope it lasts. My name is Daniel Cruz. I am 54 years old. I gave a woman the wrong sandpaper once, and she became the best thing that ever happened to me. And when someone tried to erase her, tried to reduce her life to a payout and a forged signature, she had already thought 3 steps ahead of them. She always did. She always will.
And if you've made it this far, thank you. For listening. For staying. My mother still hasn't come around on the subscriber thing, but honestly, at this point, I think she's just being stubborn. And Gloria always said stubborn people need the most patience. So I'll keep going. I'll keep telling stories that deserve to be told. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment if something here hit home. And if you've got a story of your own, the kind where someone underestimated the wrong person, I'd genuinely love to hear it. Gloria would have too. Before you go, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I ask because this community has grown in ways that genuinely surprise me. We've got viewers from all across the U.S. holding it down, our incredible Filipino community who shows up every single time with the most heartfelt comments I've ever read, our Canadian viewers who are somehow always the most thoughtful people in the comments section, and don't even get me started on New York. You guys watch like it's a competitive sport, and I love every second of it. So, tell me where you're from. Let's see the map light up. And if this story moved you even a little, share it. Not for me, for Gloria. For every person who quietly documented the truth when no one was paying attention. For every person who was underestimated by someone who should have known better. Share it so their story travels farther than the people who wronged them ever expected it to. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.